So are these polls accurate? Are these traditionally red swing states actually in play? To help us answer these questions is Dennard, a GOP commentator and a senior communications advisor for the Republican National Committee. So Paris, over the weekend, we saw the president presented with Fox News polling numbers, and he took issue with the methodology behind those polling numbers, something that we've heard before from Tim Murtaugh, other members of the Trump campaign. Is he right to criticize that methodology?
Sure, the president's right to criticize the methodology because the methodology is flawed. If you're trying to reach and have an accurate representation of the voters, then you want to get and hear from likely voters. And most of the time, these polls are not asking or polling likely voters. A lot of the times that they're asking people who are just registered. And the better thing to do is ask people who are likely voters. And so the president has a right to criticize or critique the methodology of these polls, especially when you look at the past polls in 2016, all show him not being the winner. Right. And so we know that polls are flawed. And so the methodology is really important. It's not only how they do the poll, it's what they ask and how they ask it. Because you can ask a poll, you can ask a question on a poll and have it answer the question that you want, but you can ask it in a different way and get a totally different response. Most of the time, these polls by these mainstream media outlets are skewed in a way to not have any favorable responses for President Trump.
No, and that's a very good point. The phrasing of that question is so important. In fact, our very own Liz Wheeler always does a segment on this pertaining to either abortion or Medicare for all, where she talks about it. And the way that the question is phrased makes the biggest difference. For example, the Medicare for all during the primary, we would see the same poll where people would say, oh, I'm in favor of Medicare for all. But then when you tell them, oh, by the way, your taxes will also go up, support for that system all of a sudden plummets. It goes down to something like 30% as compared to the upper 60%, where that's what makes the headlines, of course. So when we look at these polls, when we look at the figures 3 months out of the election, do you really believe that states like Texas, Arizona, and Georgia are as in play as many will say?
No, I do not. I think that the proof is in the pudding when you look at the Joe Biden campaign. Joe Biden does not have robust field staff in these key states. If Joe Biden really felt that these states were at play, he'd have a robust, aggressive, numerous amount of staff in these states. He does not. But you know who does? President Trump. And just recently, Alan West, Black American Republican, was just elected to be state chair of Texas GOP. The Texas GOP is strong, they're excited, and they are motivated. Arizona, another one that you mentioned, I'm from Arizona. I was just speaking to some people out there, and they were talking about the significant ground game that the Trump campaign has and has had there present. It's because the Trump campaign has enthusiasm, the Trump campaign, the RNC has the finances with the cash on hand, and the Trump campaign and the RNC has the infrastructure to get out the vote. If these polls and these states were really targets for the Democrats, you would see a lot more aggressive staffing on the ground. And you don't see that because they know that they're not serious.
That is a really interesting point. And speaking of Alan West, tough guy. I mean, a motorcycle accident just a couple months ago, and now he's leading the most powerful Republican organization in the entire country, basically. So it's promising to see that coming from him. And I know that he's going to do a good job down there as well. But you bring up the idea, too, that these other states don't have that ground game. And I think that actions speak louder than words. If they truly believed that these were competitive states, you'd see resources flying into these states. But that doesn't reflect what we're seeing right now. But when it comes to the president, when it comes to these polls as well, is there an advantage for him going into the November race as a little bit of more a combative underdog, acknowledging what's at stake this upcoming race and acknowledging what happened in 2016?
Look, in 2016, President Trump was always the underdog. And he worked like he was the underdog, meaning he was very aggressive on the campaign trail. He had a team in place that was really fighting to earn the vote of the American people. And so the president knows how to have a strong fight, an aggressive fight to victory. And so I think this is just going to be motivation not only for the president, but for the campaign, the RNC, and for the base, because we can look at these polls and say, you know what, we're going to prove you wrong. We proved you wrong in 2016, and we know that there's a silent majority. We know that the pundits and the pollsters and the politicians and the professionals all got it wrong, and they continue to get it wrong because they don't understand fundamentally how the American people feel and how the impact of President Trump's pro-American, pro-family, pro-business, pro-growth, pro-small business, pro-black agenda has been benefiting all of us. And so I do believe that the president does have an advantage by everyone saying and trying to count him out and saying that he can't win or that he doesn't have a path to victory or he doesn't have the base of support to do so. We saw that happen in 2016, and he's the president of the United States. It's going to happen again.
Yeah, and speaking of 2016, I think the Democratic Party should allocate some of those resources maybe to Wisconsin and Michigan this time rather than try to make Texas competitive. I think that's where they have a better chance of doing so. That's where they lost in 2016. I think all of a sudden redirecting resources to Texas, much like they did with the 2018 midterms, is a little bit misplaced in this upcoming race. But Paris Dennard, always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for coming on tonight and breaking down the election.